Check it out. I guess this is my Big Data beard. It's a mechanic shirt? I'm not sure. I feel kind of like a race car driver here. Oh, I'm gonna fix the camera. I think that's coming in a little bit better. Hey, welcome to another episode of Big Data, Big Questions, where we take questions from the folks out there learning about big data, have questions around big data, or things that I'm just interested in and maybe learned, and we talk about it on the channel. And so today we're going to talk about the 5 things, I've got those right here, the 5 things that you should know about transfer learning here on Big Data, Big Questions. So let's jump right in. So first, what is transfer learning? Transfer learning is a machine learning technique that focuses on storing knowledge gained from one problem and applying it to another related problem. It's a starting point for that related problem. So, for example, let's say that my friend at work, Dwight, has built a model for identifying bears. Dwight's a big fan of bears. You know where I'm going here. So he has built this model from the ground up, and now he has his friend, his coworker, Jim, is saying, hey, you know what? I'd like to be able to identify cats. And so what Dwight can do is share his model so that Jim doesn't have to train it as much. And that's what we call transfer learning, right? He can build off of Dwight's bear model to now identify cats. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about transfer learning. Number 2. Transfer learning speeds up time to results, and it does that because we're not starting from scratch. So like we were talking about with our friend Dwight and Jim, not having to start off building your own object detector or animal detector because you've got one for bears. Now you're going to transfer and use it for cats. So think of transfer learning as a framework for programming. So this is the way that I thought about it. When I was a developer in the .NET community, there's a lot of features that I used in .NET that would help me build quicker applications, right? So my web applications. One of them, in fact, was connecting to a database, right? So you could go through the process, and if you really think about it, all development that we mostly do now is built on the shoulder of giants, right? We're always abstracting away. But in the .NET community, I wanted to connect to a database. I could use something called connection string. I had to write that down because it's been a long time since I've done it. But so all the complicated details of connecting to SQL Server and setting all that up, abstracted away, I was able to use that function in about like 1 to 2 lines of code to be able to start my web application. So think of using transfer learning for those data teams not having to start from scratch. So that's why we can speed that process up. Number 3, had to let the dog out. Dog was going crazy. Transfer learning can reduce the amount of data needed to build your model. Back to our example of bears. So built it from the ground up. All the specific data in there to learn, to understand how to do object detection was already done by our friend Jim. So same thing we talk about transfer learning, right? So you can get a project where, hey, a majority of the data has already been built in, so now you're not having to start from scratch like we were talking about for speed, but this also helps us from a data perspective. Think about if you've done anything with the Jetson Nano project, right? So one of the first Hello World applications is thumbs up or thumbs down. Now that object detection, they've already built it a good bit, right? So the model, you're not really starting from scratch. And so you still have to train the model, but you're not having to go and say, hey, let's learn how to identify a hand, right? So what you're doing is you're building in that specific image, like this is a thumbs up, this is a thumb down, and you're taking it from different angles. So this is the same when we talk about certain transfer learning models that you can get that are maybe 80% trained of where you need to go. So think of only being able to bring your data to it. So my favorite example is what we're seeing in the healthcare space. So imagine being able to take an application or a model that's designed to help with heart conditions. And so maybe it can identify a specific kind of heart condition, but now you can apply it to different areas, right? So it can be there to help and look for different kinds of diseases, whether it's heart attack, whether it's athlete profiles. But you're applying that data because you've already built it from the ground up with other portions of data. So being able to bring more data, being able to bring less data actually brings in more applications, right? Because we haven't talked about it a lot on this channel, but there is a small data portion, and there's a lot of there's a lot of challenges sometimes with finding the right data or finding enough data to really train. And so that's where transfer learning can help. Number four thing that you should know for transfer learning is most object detection uses transfer learning, right? We're not building from the ground up. Let's go back to our model that our friend Dwight built. And so think of all the edges here. So as he's building this model, he's probably using transfer learning. And in fact, if you've done any tutorials, if you've been through my Pluralsight course where I use TF-Learn, we are using a form of transfer learning because we didn't build the object detection to be able to test all the different edges, right? So it was all built in. In our image here, look where, hey, how do you define the edge between the green grass and then the brown bear here? So, object detection is mostly transfer learning because, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is detect edges and then find out what that specific image is and then train our model to understand that. So if you've done any kind of tutorials, you've probably used transfer learning. The number 5 thing you should know about transfer learning is NVIDIA has a specific transfer learning toolkit. It's actually in its 2nd generation. So we all know here at Big Data, Big Questions, we love the NVIDIA team. Well, NVIDIA's GPU Cloud, or NGC, they've cataloged different frameworks for deep learning, and we've talked about that before, right? You can go out there and do different models. Now, specifically, they have transfer learning models that you can use and enable, right? And so the way that they look at it is they want to enable faster and accurate AI training. And so they've just released their second 2.0 version. And this is all with the NVIDIA NGC Cloud. And so you can see here that these are purpose-built AI models that can either be used as is, right? Or you can add more data or change and do all the things that you would if you were downloading and building out different models as well too. So really, really cool if you want to get hands-on. I encourage you, if you're doing any kind of tutorials with deep learning, want to do anything to learn, jump into the NGC Cloud and take a tour. Go ahead, download a couple of those, walk through some of those tutorials. So to recap, we talked about what transfer learning is, the 5 different things that we need to know about it, with defining it, understanding that it speeds up our queries, allows for us to use less data. A lot of object detection already incorporates transfer learning, and we talked about NGC and where we can actually go and download some transfer learning models to play with. I think it's important for data engineers and data teams to understand transfer learning. If you think about it, it's really how we learn as humans too, right? The first time I learned to program with object-oriented and Java, it was pretty hard, right? But then when I went to C#, it was a lot easier because I kind of had a baseline, right? And so think of that for transfer learning. So if you have any questions for Big Data, Big Questions, feel free to put them in the comment section here below. And please, if you find this enjoyable, share it with your friends and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode of Big Data, Big Questions.